That is right, guys. Your favorite chronically dehydrated YouTuber is back, and today I'm going to be doing part 2 of the Peristeen video that I did last week about my bowel program, basically. This time I'm gonna go more into detail about what has worked for me personally. If you didn't catch the first video that I did about it, you should probably go and watch that first. I explain more about how the actual process works. But before we get into it, let me just clarify that as a paraplegic, the Peristeen is not the magic solution. It's definitely not the cheapest, the easiest, or the quickest bowel program. But I do think that it is important to seek out other different types of bowel programs if the one you're using isn't working for you, because if it's not successful and you're not clean, then that can lead to a lot of UTIs, and that's not good for your future kidney and bladder health. I was using it every day in the beginning, and after I got used to it, I was pretty good for a few weeks, and then suddenly it stopped being as successful, and I would have problems like a few hours after I had done it, or even sometimes in the middle of the day after. So I started thinking, and I was basically at my wit's end. I had nothing else to try basically besides actually doing it every other day. And I know that sounds counterproductive, like, Tara, what are you even talking about? If you're having problems doing it every day, then what makes you think doing it every other day is going to fix your problem at all? And I know this sounds confusing too, but the Peristeen is not meant to be your bowel movement. It is meant to stimulate or trigger a bowel movement. So I figured if I was having problems so much later after doing the Peristeen, then I thought, well, maybe there isn't enough in there to come out right then, so it's coming out later. Does it make sense? But if you try changing how often you're using the Peristeen and you're still having problems, you could do the Peristeen back-to-back twice. So if you feel like you haven't got enough the first time, then you can do it again in hopes that you will get enough. And when I have done that, I almost always get more, so it couldn't hurt. And I also found that by using warmer temperature water would dissolve whatever was in there quicker and therefore make the process quicker. And this is just what I did, but I also accounted for about an extra 100 milliliters of water because some of the water actually stays in the tubes while you're pumping the water. And then I also used some of the water to lubricate the catheter. And then when you are pumping the water itself in, I usually pump once in like 5 to 10 seconds, but the actual process of when I start pumping the water in and then when I'm done and I take the catheter out, that's usually about 10 minutes, and I feel like that's a good amount of time to dissolve and then let it all out. I've also found that if you put the water bag up higher, like maybe if you've got a counter right next to the toilet that you just leave it on, I think gravity just helps the water come out from the tubes easier, so it can also go quicker that way. And I also wasted so many catheters for, I don't know, like the first like month and a half or two, because I actually didn't know that you could reuse the catheters. So if it like fell out somehow when you were not done yet, or if you had to get more water for whatever reason, like maybe if you drank the water, which is very possible. I've done it many times if you are dehydrated, because as I've already said, I am very dehydrated and I know it's not good, but you can, like, if the balloon is still working fine and it's still holding air, you can just inflate it again. And this part won't make sense to you unless you have watched the first video where I explained how the Peristeen actually works, but the little thing, I'll put a picture around here. If you end up putting in too much water and you don't need that much for whatever reason, then you can actually change the little setting from the water drop to the blue inflate. You don't have to actually inflate the balloon anymore. You just switch the setting and the water will stop. But when you're done, you actually have to disconnect the blue tube completely from this thing and the catheter to get the water out, because you don't want the water sitting in it. And you also have to wait to put it to the orange setting to let the water out until you have it in the bathtub or sink. I did not know this at first, and it contributed to a lot of messes that I would make when I first started using the Peristeen, cause water would be all over the floor. And then again, after you're done and you take out the catheter, I also like to press on the left side of my stomach just to speed the process up of getting all the water out. And since changing the frequency of how I do it, it only takes about 5 minutes now for the water to come out after you take the catheter out, doing every other day. But when I did it every day, it would actually still be coming after 45 minutes, sometimes a lot more, which I guess would also be a sign that you can maybe change the frequency. But again, do whatever works for you. And lastly, if these tips are still not working for you, there are also forums online for the Peristeen, and I literally just googled Peristeen forums or any other Peristeen questions, and these little sites would come up from other people's advice. So if my advice isn't working, go check out theirs. And that is all I have for you today, guys. But again, if you're comfortable, you can also put down what kind of bowel program you use if you don't use the Peristeen. And even if you do use the Peristeen, you can just leave a comment on what works for you, because maybe you can help someone else. Also, I just made my Instagram public for anyone to follow, and I guess I'll leave that here. Thanks, guys!